Imagine a moment so intense, it feels like the room itself is holding its breath. If the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you? Jill Takuda doesn't just ask, she demands accountability, putting Pete Hegseth right on the hot seat. The tension is electric, the stakes are real, and every second feels like a moral showdown unfolding before your eyes. As questions fly and answers teeter between evasive and explosive, you can't help but lean in, wondering what the truth really is and what it says about power, responsibility, and conscience. This isn't just a debate, it's a confrontation that will leave you questioning what you would do in a world where authority challenges morality.
Yes or no is simple.
There's been a lot of hyperbole and incorrect reporting around that situation, but we did invite Elon over to come talk to us generally, but there was no war plans being discussed.
Okay, so whose idea was it to invite him to the Pentagon for a briefing? You mentioned you served at the pleasure of the president. Was it the president's will to have him come and be briefed?
Well, as you know, at that time, Elon Musk was leading up Doge efforts, and we've taken a great investment in Doge at DoD, and so getting his input on how we make DoD more efficient makes a great deal of sense.
Okay, but don't you think it's a conflict of interest for the world's richest man? Many of the contracts that the DoD is engaged in, billions of dollars of contracts going to his company, and he is, as to your point, was leading Doge, which was involved in cutting hundreds of contracts, but also becoming intimately aware of the platforms and the requirements that would be given out for new contracts. Did you not think it was a conflict of interest to invite someone with financial interests into the Pentagon to have firsthand knowledge of what they could then bid on for their own, enrichment?
Ma'am, it was just an informal discussion, but I'll tell you, anyone that knows our Defense Department knows we show no preference to any company other than what your capabilities are, and we're grateful for the places where his companies benefit our national defense.
So for a $280 million donation, the world's richest man with companies intimately linked and involved in billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense gained access into the Pentagon. So would you say that any company right now that has multi-billion-dollar contracts with the Department of Defense has access to the Pentagon right now? 1-hour briefings with you, personally.
On the regular basis,
the answer
I meet with many people and many different companies and many different aspects of our defense industrial base to ensure we have the best possible capabilities. It would be imprudent to do
Well, I'm sure for an investment of $280 million, Elon's investors are quite happy that it's come out into the billions. I want to jump questions right now. Mr. Secretary, on January 6, 2021, rioters and looters attacked federal law enforcement officials, vandalized and destroyed federal government property, and caused an estimated $2.7 billion in damages right here at the Capitol. Would you have sent the National Guard and the Marines in on that day?
Well, unfortunately, President Trump requested the National Guard in advance, and that was...
It took him quite a long time. I'm asking you, as Secretary of Defense, would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day? We had 140 Capitol Police officers injured. One died the next day. Would you have sent in the National Guard and the Marines?
As I said, President Trump directed National Guard to be there in advance.
And I think you can look at the record of how long it actually took for him to actually send them in. But it's good to hear that it sounds like you would have sent in the National Guard and the Marines on that day in which the insurrection was taking place right here at the Capitol. Mr. Secretary, during your confirmation hearing, you failed to deny the conclusion that you would carry out an order to shoot protesters in the legs. So let me be direct. Given what we are seeing across the country right now, would you carry out or issue an order by the president for our military to fire upon protesters actively engaging in their civil right to exercise free speech, their First Amendment rights? Would you give that order from the president?
I assume you're insinuating what's going on in Los Angeles, and I wouldn't call
Not just
that a
Los
peaceful
Angeles.
protest.
If we take a look at protests throughout the country, it's a simple question. If directed by the president, would you order our military to fire upon protesters? Simple yes or no.
Ma'am, we have, as you know, and as this committee knows, we have standard rules of engagement that are in place that give guidance to our troops, and they abide by them.
I'm asking what you would do. Again, you said you serve at the pleasure of the president. Is that not true?
I do serve at the
So
pleasure.
if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you do so? Now, you failed to answer this question as well in your confirmation hearing when asked by members of the Senate.
Because I refuse to accept a false hypothetical that's attempting to put me in a corner and make it look like a
At
representation.
a time when we
of
have
another.
more
We have
Marines and
standard
National
rules of
Guard in Los
engagement, and they are
Angeles than
followed.
we do in Syria and Iran alone, I don't think this is a hypothetical. This is an actual situation that we are dealing with right now.
The hearing room on Capitol Hill is charged with a palpable tension, as if the very air is holding its breath. Dim lights cast long shadows across polished wood, rows of seats filled with aides, observers, and journalists waiting for the drama to unfold. At the center sits Pete Hegseth, nominee for one of the nation's most powerful defense positions, his posture straight and precise, his hands clasped as if to steady the invisible weight pressing down on him. Across from him, Congresswoman Jill Takuda leans forward with unwavering focus, her gaze fixed, her voice calm yet piercing as she asks a question that immediately shifts the room's atmosphere. If the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you? The words land like a thunderclap, a hypothetical so stark and morally loaded that the silence that follows feels almost unbearable. Every observer, live and virtual, senses the stakes. This is no ordinary hearing. This is a test of conscience, a test of judgment, a test of the very principles that define ethical leadership. Hegseth responds cautiously, referencing military procedures, rules of engagement, and the framework within which forces operate. He does not utter the categorical no that would reassure the public and lawmakers alike. That absence of absolute refusal resonates louder than any spoken word, revealing the tension between loyalty to orders, political pressure, and the obligations of moral and constitutional responsibility. The subtle hesitation signals the complexities inherent in leadership at the highest levels, navigating authority, ethical boundaries, and human life under intense scrutiny. Observers can almost feel the internal calculus, the mental weighing of consequences, the professional training battling with personal conscience. The room itself seems to mirror this struggle. Every subtle movement, glance, and pause carrying meaning beyond the surface conversation. As the hearing continues, scrutiny intensifies. Lawmakers probe past controversies, decision-making patterns, and temperament under pressure, though nothing is presented as proven wrongdoing. Each carefully chosen word, each sidestep, reveals layers of judgment and character, providing a window into the ethical mindset of someone entrusted with immense power. Against the backdrop of recent events involving domestic unrest, the proper use of military force, and public concern over civil liberties, the hypothetical scenario becomes a reflection of real fears and responsibilities. Observers are reminded that leadership is not merely about procedural knowledge or experience, it is about the courage to uphold principles even when confronted with difficult orders, and the clarity to draw moral lines that cannot be crossed. Ambiguity, even subtle, can carry consequences far beyond the hearing room. The tension is heightened by the psychological and human dynamics in the room. Every gesture, every shift in posture, every quick glance communicates what words cannot. Observers witness a study in decision-making under scrutiny, the weighing of loyalty, ambition, ethical responsibility, and potential consequences. Hegseth's avoidance of a definitive response leaves space for reflection, for fear, speculation, and anticipation. The public, in turn, is invited to consider the delicate balance between power, responsibility, and the protection of civil liberties. Leadership, in this context, is as much about moral courage as it is about knowledge or experience. The choices not articulated become as telling as those declared, revealing the boundaries of character under pressure. When the hearing concludes, the silence that follows is almost as profound as the question itself. The cameras eventually power down, the room empties, but the echoes of that pivotal moment linger. Viewers are left to reflect on the hesitation, the unanswered questions, and the ethical implications embedded in every carefully worded response. In leadership, what is not said often carries as much weight as what is spoken, particularly when constitutional and moral responsibilities are at stake. This hearing, while procedural in form, becomes a mirror reflecting the fragility of democratic norms and the necessity for ethical clarity. It demonstrates that the preservation of liberty depends not only on law and policy, but on the courage of leaders to uphold principles when confronted with the toughest decisions. Ultimately, the hearing is a microcosm of the tension between authority and conscience, power and principle, and obedience and ethics. It reminds the public that vigilance and scrutiny are essential to safeguarding democracy, that the courage to uphold constitutional and moral standards is a defining trait of effective leadership, and that the consequences of hesitation or ambiguity can extend far beyond the immediate moment. Each carefully constructed response, each pause, each avoidance reveals lessons about accountability, responsibility, and the moral challenges inherent in positions of power. The simple, piercing question, if the president told you to shoot people in the legs, would you? Remains a haunting reminder that the most critical test of leadership is not in words, but in the courage and clarity to act ethically, decisively, and in defense of the nation's principles.